Hey everybody, what's going on? We are working today on a couple of projects here. As you see, we have two of these air compressors out here. This second one that you're looking at right now is actually one that I inherited from my dad. We're going to do something with that a little bit later on a separate video. But today, what I want to look at right now is this guy right here. Now I'm going to fire this thing up in a minute. And what we're going to do is you're going to see that those gauges on the front are not going to go up. We're having some kind of a problem with it that is prohibiting the pressure from building up inside of the compressor. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and fire it up right now. I'm going to show you that, and then we're going to start taking it apart and trying to see what's going on. Today, I'm going to be using hearing protection because the air compressor is pretty loud, and we're also going to be using eye protection in case anything were to pop off or, God forbid, something were to explode out of this thing because I messed something up when I'm taking it apart. At least my eyes are protected. All right, everybody, let's go ahead and let's get to it. Okay, now before we get started here, I want you to know that I've already gone and checked the drain cock on the back of this. Let me show you what that looks like. Right here is the drain for this. And all you do is just lefty loose and righty tighty, and that's how you drain everything out of it. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with these, or any air compressor, over time they will build up moisture on the inside of them, and you're going to want to drain that out. The general recommended practice is to do that every time you use it. But at least do it, once a month, or if you're not going to use it for a while, make sure you do it before you put it away. All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn it on now. We're going to let this pressure build up. Okay, I let that run for probably a good minute, and you see the PSI has not gotten above 20. So that's obviously not a good thing. So we're going to start taking this apart. If you look in the top here, you can see here is one hole here. There's another one to the left, and then there's also two in the back, right back over there. What we're going to do, whoops, a little bit further. Here we go. Right back over there on those two corners. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to take that apart to get to the inside and see if we can figure out what the problem is. Now, I can actually hear some air coming out, but I can't tell from where, because right over here, there's this little drain, and it's not coming from that, and it's not coming from underneath where that drain valve is. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and unplug this, because I am going to start messing with some electrical stuff in here, and I don't want to take a chance of getting shocked. So these are going to be 4 Phillips screws, and this is a pretty average length Phillips screwdriver that I'm using here. It's probably like a, I don't know, like about a 4.5 incher. All right, we had to go get some power stuff here to really expedite things along a little bit. Okay, well, let's try to zoom this guy in a little bit so you guys can get, so you guys can get a much better view of what's going on the inside here. Okay, well, I've already found the problem, folks. So while I do love to find a solution to a problem quickly, it's a shame that it's not just something that I can use the things I have on hand to fix. But right here, you can see that this piece of pipe, this is the actual pipe that is sending air into the compressor. There is a compression fitting in here, which we'll talk about those a little bit more in the future. But this compression fitting is what holds this down and holds it in place and keeps the air completely sealed. So I'm going to look around my garage and see if I can find something to fix this with. We might be able to get away with just making a few adjustments and retightening it. I might be able to bend this out, take this bend out of here a little bit and give us a little bit more room if I have to cut it. We'll take a look and see what we can come up with here. Okay, I took a adjustable wrench that was bigger than it needed to be to break this thing loose here, but we're going to loosen this up and see what we can come up with here. Okay, Now I can see that a piece of the pipe here has broken off inside there. So we're going to try to see if I can just pull this out and reset it back in a little bit lower. And we've got some room to work with, and I think we could pull that off. So I'm going to loosen the top one just a little bit as well. See how I said this one's bigger than it needs to be? So we're going to loosen that just to move it out of the way. And then I'm going to see if I can just grab a pair of pliers and just pull that right out of there. But this is not the best thing for this. Let's just see. Okay, that came out pretty easily. All right, let's see what we got here. Okay, so this is the pipe. You can see right here, it comes down to here. The compression fitting is sliding up over the end of the pipe right here. So I'm going to just give this a little wiggle to see if I can take this out. No, it's on there pretty good, so I'll have to do some more work with that. But you can see right here, a little bit of some rust. But it's just broken off right there. So I'm going to go ahead and find a way to get that undone. And I think that we can just finagle this. Like I said, I'm going to give it a little bit of a bend. I have a bending tool that we can use to bend this if we have to. But I think that we're going to be able to just bend it in place. I don't think we're going to have to do a whole lot. So let me kind of play around with this compression fitting and get this piece of it off, and we'll kind of go from there. Okay, so what I did was I took these two pair of pliers here, and I was able to get a grip on to this compression fitting right here and kind of wiggle it back and forth, and I've got that off now. So I'm just going to go ahead and clean it up a little bit. Okay, I just took a piece of steel wool, and steel wool to me, it's like a lifesaver. I use steel wool all the time, but I just took the steel wool and just kind of rubbed it on the edges there, and that kind of got out those rough spots, and I think it's going to be okay. So now with the compression fittings, when you're reinstalling these, what you got to make sure that you do is put the fitting in first. So as you can see, here's the fitting. This has to go on first, like this. And then the compression piece will go over top. Now what I probably ought to maybe do, it broke off really cleanly. I'm tempted to take my pipe cutter and just cut a little bit off of that, but I really don't want to lose any more. If I can squeeze that on there without doing that, I'd like to. I'm going to put a file on that just to kind of, because I don't think the steel wool is going to get enough off of that. Plus, I don't want any steel wool shavings getting down in there. But it's just a little bit rougher than I'd like it to be. Okay, I come up with a little bit of a strategy, so I kind of just hit this a little bit. I kind of hammered on it until I could get to a point where I got it on the end. It's not seated as far as the other end, as you can see, where the other end is going up with about 1/4 of an inch of extra space. But this is going to be a temporary fix. I don't like the way this looks, and it's kind of bent a little bit and a little bit of a kind of a crummy look. But what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm still going to go ahead and be able to get this back in. This will seat in here. This will screw down on top of that like that. So that's going to work. And then I'll have to bend this back just a tad to get it back into here. But I'll go ahead and take a few minutes and get that done right now. Snug this up. I'm going to zoom back just a tad so you can see everything again. There we go. All right. Get this guy tightened up. Again, using the way too big adjustable wrench. But use what you have. Actually, it's not that I don't have something else. It's just that I have a bunch of boxes I've been breaking down in my garage, and they are blocking my means of ingress and egress from the garage right now. So that's a whole separate story. We'll talk about it later. Now, I'm not going to crank this down too crazy tight because this particular piece of pipe, it's just a thin aluminum pipe. It bends really, really easily. So I don't want to bend it any worse than it is. Like I said, I'm going to replace it. I'll probably just get some copper, or I might be able to find something just like this fairly cheap at like Home Depot, or maybe I'll go to Amazon. I'm not really sure. But I'll go ahead and get this tightened back up on this side, and we'll fire it up, and we'll see if we can see if this thing will hold air for us. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put my hearing protection back on again, because I know this thing is going to be loud. And I'm plugging it in. Hopefully we didn't do anything weird on the electrical side of things. I don't think there should be any issues with that. So let me go ahead and get that fired up. And we'll see if this bad boy will hold some air for us. Okay, now you can hear it's leaking. I don't know if you can, but I can definitely hear it. Okay, and we are leaking air from right up here. Didn't zoom the right way here for you guys. Okay, it is leaking right here. See it? And what happened is this one now has a bend to it. So I basically have two options here. It is holding air. We definitely know that's the problem. But what we're going to have to do is get this to where it is straight and then rebend it. And I've got a bender. We can make that happen. So let me see if I can go do that real quick. So the strangest thing just happened. I loosened this up and the leaking stopped. So it's still like barely, I mean, it's barely on. It's barely snugged on, but it looks like it's holding air. So let's plug it back in again and see what we can get. Okay, well, I don't hear any leaking. Let's go ahead and let it keep going. So I really want to know why it's capping out at that 60 PSI. Okay, everybody, I have made a trip to Home Depot and picked up a few supplies to get back to our air compressor repair video. So as you might remember, this is the old piece of aluminum that was connected up right in here, and it broke off down there at the bottom. So I tried to get that repaired and put back together, and it just wasn't working out. So I went to Home Depot. Now this is regular copper line, 1/4 inch. This is the same kind of copper line you would use if you wanted to run a water supply line for an ice maker. This is exactly what you would use. Now, I only need a little bit of this, but this was about $13 for, I think it was a 15-foot section, no, 10-foot section. So, you know, it's right around $1 a foot. But I'm going to cut this off. I'm going to try and do some approximate measurements. We're going to cut this off. I'm going to show you a couple of things you can use to bend this, because we've got to get it bent in just the right way so that this lid can close down all the way without making contact, because this is going to get pretty hot when that compressor fires off. Next piece of information. So I bought these right here. These are compression fittings, and this has everything in it that you would need. It's got the compression nut and this little guy right here. We do not need this slider piece. I don't know what the technical term is for it, but we don't need that. We need the compression fitting, and we need this sleeve right here. Those are the things that we need for this project. So I told the guy at Home Depot, I said, hey, my compression fittings are threaded for, I think it was, M10 by 1.0. And he handed me these. And of course I saw, you know, 1/4 inch outer diameter. And I thought, well, it might still be okay, because it is on a 1/4 inch line. But of course, it didn't make any reference to the threads themselves. So when I took them out of the package, I noticed that they do not thread on at all. These are much bigger. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to make a rough measurement of what we estimate the size of the copper to be. I might cut it just a little bit long, because you're always better to be a little long than to be a little bit short. And Then we're going to use a bender, like a brake line bender, which I'll show you guys how to use that, and we'll get everything bent into shape. Now I've got 3 different cutters here today. This cutter here is designed for like PVC and PEX and stuff. So this is a really, really good cutter, and it's very efficient, works really well, but it's only going to be used for like your plastic types of plumbing materials. Now this right here was my granddad's old pipe cutter, made in the USA. I am probably going to be using this right here, but you can do a really wide piece of pipe with this. And you can also use this to kind of deburr the inside of it afterwards. So this is a pretty cool, handy little pipe cutter. Now, I really like this one too. I've got a couple of these small ones laying around here. And these are really handy when you're in a confined space. So they work really, really well. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and measure up the pipe. I'll get that cut to size. We need to get these sleeves off of here. And they are really on there pretty solidly. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut this aluminum pipe right here, pull both the compression fittings off, and then we'll reuse those. So stand by here. Okay, so from here I'm just going to kind of eyeball this up a little bit, just kind of make a rough estimate as to about how long that is. So that would bring us to about right here, but you got to remember we lost a little bit on the inside of that when it broke off, so it's probably more like down about here. Like I said, we'll go a little bit long at the beginning just to make sure that we've got a little bit of extra, and we can always trim that again. Now this is Granddaddy's old cutter, so just make sure that you're getting you want to make sure that your pipe is sitting right in the middle there in that little section so that it lines up with your cutting wheel. So we'll get that in place. You know, whenever I use my granddad's old tools, I always wonder, you know, how many different projects he does, and or how many projects he did with these things years ago. And you know, like if this little pipe cutter could talk, because I know my granddad years ago, he did a lot of plumbing. He redid all the plumbing in the basement. They had a big water container, and they had a spring, and the spring water went about 300 feet from where the spring was to the house, and he did all the piping and plumbing. It was kind of neat. Anyway, what you do with these is you just tighten it up just enough to where you get grip on the pipe, and just do a couple of rotations around it. And then you're going to give it a little bit of a tighten here, and then do it again. And tighten again. This is going to be really fast to cut because it's pretty thin. And we'll push in there again. And you just keep going in every couple of turns. And that brings those blades even closer. And it'll make a nice even cut for us here in just a second. And like I said, you can twist it tighter and quicker and be a little more aggressive about it. I'm just kind of trying to show you how to do things safer in the best way possible. It's going to break free here in just a second. There we go. Okay, so now we have our freshly cut piece of copper pipe here ready to go. And we can see here that it is, ooh, yeah, it might end up being almost a good ½ inch longer than it needs to be. Okay, I'm back with you here. I went ahead and made a cut, and we got a piece now that's nice and long here that should go in there pretty straight like that. We'll get a sleeve around that. We're going to put a bend probably right about here to get it over this way, and then another one going straight down. So I'm going to go ahead and start with this top bend here first. I'll make a couple of bends here using this bender here. I got this years ago when I was doing a brake line job on one of my cars. And we're just going to basically put this in here, and we're going to use this edge, this rounded edge. That's how we're going to basically make it bend without crimping it too much. Copper is a little bit funky. This thin copper will bend and crimp really easily. As long as it doesn't pinch, then you're going to be fine. You know, the amount of air moving through this is not that much. It's not going to be a big deal. You just don't want to pinch the copper, and that might cause, you know, premature fatigue in the copper down the road. So let me do a little bit of bending, and I'll get back to you in a second. So I've got an idea what I'm going to do here. I'm going to go ahead and take this guy out and then insert the pipe in and then retighten it down. Because if you look here with what we've got right now, you see I can go in here fine. That's working great. And I can go in here fine, no problem. But the only way I'm going to get them to go together is by bending. So I'm actually going to take this out, put it around, slide that in, and then retighten that back down. So I'll get back to you in just a second when I've had that done. All right, so I got that done. We're going to go ahead and put the sleeves on here. So this will be the one for the bottom. And we got the one for the top here. And I completely forgot to cut my other piece. So let me get that cut real quick and come back to you again. I got to get the compression fittings off of this guy right here. Let me cut that right now. We are going to go ahead now. I've got the new wire with the new piece of pipe with the compression fittings with the little sleeve in there. We got everything the way we need it to be. We're going to get that guy threaded over here. We'll get this guy threaded over here. Okay, everybody, this took a little bit longer than I wanted to, so I didn't want to have, like, 30 minutes of fast forwarded footage. But what I've got here now is I took this fitting out so that I could just slide the whole thing in as a unit and then tighten this up. So now I'm going to tighten this back up here at the compressor. I'm going to tighten this compression fitting here. I'm going to tighten this compression fitting down here. And then we should be good to fire everything up. So I'm going to get all of those all squared away. We'll plug it back in and we'll fire it up and see what we got here. So stand by. Now, something else I'm going to talk about here while I'm tightening this is, you saw this this bender that I was using here. Like I said, I got this for brake lines, but I've heard people say before, I've never done it myself, but they've said that if you don't have one of those, that you can just use an aluminum bat. So you could just take the end of the ball bat and you could just bend it off of one of these ends, whatever size of a bend you need. Just go to that point in the bat and make your bend. Like I said, I haven't done it before, but it sounds like a pretty creative way to do things. So definitely worth keeping in mind. Now, as you can probably see too, I want you to make note of this here. Where the bend is, you can see where it flattened out a little bit. That's okay. As long as it doesn't pinch, then we're going to be fine. There's plenty of airflow through there. If they needed more airflow, they probably would have used a thicker tube than just a 1/4 inch. Now, this has more room to go, but I'm not going to tighten it anymore. I'm going to go ahead and plug it in and fire it up because I think this is all that we need. So you should be able to see the gauges right here. And I will plug this in and just let it run. I'll fast forward the video so you don't have to sit here and wait for, listen to the compressor filling up for like an hour here. So stand by. All right, everybody. Well, it took, I don't know, probably took about 2 minutes or so to fully fill back up, which is about par for the course for what it usually takes. Let's see how hot this is. Yeah, it is nice and hot, man. That air, the air moving across this thing is nice and warm, but I'm pretty sure that's just the way it's always been. One thing you could do right now, if you wanted to take some soapy water and just spray it around all these connections here, you could definitely do that to see if there's any leaking. Now, I would definitely advise that you unplug it before you do that. You got a lot of electrical wires in here, and you just don't want to mess around with it. Now, one thing I did see happen is, see these little plugs right? Ooh, let me zoom out so you can see those. You're not even going to be able to pull this thing a little bit closer. These two plugs right here, right? That's 110 coming directly out of the plug. And when I went to turn this back on a few minutes ago, the it wouldn't go on. And I'm thinking, like, what's going on here? And one of those plugs had just popped off. So just make sure that you double check those before you reassemble everything. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, go ahead and unplug this so that it doesn't kick back on again, and go do some other projects, things I have going on. And I'll come back and check this again, maybe in a half hour. If an air compressor, in my opinion, if I can turn it on, and if it's not losing air after, 10 or 15 minutes, that's good enough for me. So I'm happy with that. So like I said, it's up to 100 PSI. That's the cutoff point. So, I think we're in business. I think it's doing exactly what it needs to do. We'll know in a few minutes, but looks like our fix did the job here. So feel free to comment if you've had this project before, you've done something similar, had a different problem. Any suggestions or tips for, ways to do things better? I'm not a copper bending expert or anything like that, but you know what you do? you save yourself some money. This is the kind of thing right here that somebody would have thrown this away. They would have just thrown it out in the dumpster or out into the, their regular trash every week, and it would be gone. I spent $15 is what it cost. No, I take that back. It was $13 for the 10 feet of copper, and the compression fittings were $2.50 each, and I honestly just needed the sleeves on the inside of those. So for less than $20, I basically got my air compressor back, and it should function for a long time. If it doesn't, I've got spare parts. I can do it again. So no big deal. But anyway, folks, dive into some projects, try some new stuff. I hope you learned something from this one. Feel free to leave some comments, let me know what you think, and we'll talk to you soon.